In today's episode, I'm interviewing Glenn Tan, who's the CEO and founder of Zavior, a company that's revolutionizing the security space within AI. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lee.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have this chat, especially because in the last episode, we actually spoke a lot about the concerns surrounding AI and security. But before we dive into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey into your startup. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, I mean, a bit of a backstory as well for me, right? I've always been involved in any form of business, right? I grew up in a household where I would come home from school, drop my bags, and then go out to my dad's restaurant and start, setting up shop, start collecting orders and then processing that. So it's always been something that I firmly believe in, right? Creating value, running a business and doing stuff along the lines of people and processes, right? So I think from there, interestingly, through a point of elimination, I decided to become an engineer,
Mhm.
right? So it was a process of like, yeah, I could learn everything else, but I could never be an engineer outside of a doctor. So that's kind of where I started my career as well in the space of engineering. And I was always doing design and building products and pushing products out for a large multinational that builds hard drives, right? So that's where I started my journey, right? And how I sort of come to something like what we're building with Zavior here, right? In Zavior, it's kind of like a vertical, which is like security, data privacy, but actually it's also a horizontal, right? That cuts across every single industry that you're involved in, right?
Mm.
And why I kind of shared that background that I had is because throughout my whole entire life, I've been exposed to so many different industries, right? What I just shared with you was like the restaurant industry, the F&B industry. When I was even younger, my dad started the first sort of photo processing store, right? In my neighborhood, right? So he was doing photos. Now those films, disposable films, are like a fad now, right? But it used to be the only way to capture photos. So photography up to engineering, and then even in my days when I was in an accelerator, I was also involved in like building construction, maritime. So vast industries that have been exposed to, right? And then in rooms with some of these people sharing how they build new things, how they build innovative products, how they're doing things very differently. But at the end of the day, I did see that there is a commonality in all businesses and all value creation, right? Is we're always trying to solve a problem or we're always trying to create value. So um, being a founder was somewhat in a way made for me, right? But also the leap of starting a startup to solve such a problem, which many people don't really think about, right? It's definitely a very interesting journey so far. Yeah. Mm.
Well, sounds like it, man. It sounds like you've gone through so many different avenues, right? So many different industries and got exposed to so many different people as well along the way that have taught you lots of lessons and things like that, right? I
Yeah.
myself have also had a kind of a similar journey. I've done business, recruitment, sales, I've done English teaching, and now I'm in my own startup. So I think I don't know. What is your experience with talking to other founders? Do you think other founders are, have similar types of journeys where they try different industries and stuff like that before they land on their problem, or how does that usually go?
I mean, on the side, I really do help other founders as well, either through a mentoring session or like through helping them figure out product market fit and stuff like that. So I think one of the biggest disparity of being a founder versus following a path that has already been set, which is like, in the corporate world. I think the biggest thing is sometimes people think being a founder is like in the corporate world,
Mm,
right? So let me explain a little bit about that concept, right? I think as a when you work for somebody, someone writes that path for you,
mhm,
right? Or you stay in government, or if where I'm at in Singapore, if you follow everything the government sets out for you, you will succeed to that extent, right?
mm,
But as a founder, you don't have those rules because you kind of set them, right? Or you tweak them, right? And the biggest, I think, disparity people feel is that when they become a founder, they go like, so how much revenue can I raise my next million? You know, how much revenue does it take to be this, right? Then you realize as a founder, there is no such formula, right? It's kind of what we saw retrospectively of another founder, right?
Mhm.
But actually, we don't have these things. So when you become a founder, if we still think that we are essentially waiting for someone to tell us this is the metrics to get this raise, this is the marketing things you need to do to get your acquisition of clients, right? Then unfortunately it's sorely misaligned, because you will never get that to a certain to a certain extent, right? People will tell you, share you stories, but not every um lesson is actually made the same as well as a founder. Yeah.
That's right, man. And many of the lessons that you learn from other people are specific to their stories, right?
Yeah.
Whereas each founder is kind of solving their own problems that they're passionate about. And, a lesson might not be applicable for the problem or the situation that we're in. So exactly. I totally resonate with what you just said because I myself worked until I was about 34 for other companies, other people, like getting
Yep.
directions from bosses and all that thing. And just 2 years ago, I joined the Antler program, which is how we connected, right? Via
Yep.
the group chat. And yeah, man, I think that getting direction is what a lot of founders really need. So how did you, I guess, learn how to set your own, metrics and expectations? Yeah.
Well, I guess to set your own expectations, I think one has to believe that you there's two ways to look at it for the same like thing we're doing, right? One is that it sucks because no one's gonna tell me what to do, right?
Mhm.
But then on hindsight, it's like, hey, I can set out to do anything. And as long as I create value or I bring or I solve a problem for somebody, right? That one person is gonna be impacted, right? So as a whenever you start any startup or any business, right? Validation is key, right? So we talked about validation a lot in every aspect of business, right? And validation just means that if I tell you that the pencil, right, can actually write, right? It's up to you and myself, to convince each other that that's true, right?
Mhm.
But if let's say I gave you a very normal pencil and you start writing it and then it doesn't work,
Mhm.
right? What happens then? You get to the point where, oh, like Glenn gave me something that does a pencil that doesn't work. But here's the thing, maybe it's a mechanical pencil that you need to click at the back, right?
Mhm.
So in that same context is that we then have to find a way to tell the person that, look, you're so used to sharpening pencils and then you create debris versus now you have mechanical pencils and then you click once and then you get that thing, and if it starts to wear off, you click it again, it just magically comes up, right?
Mhm.
Then you think about it, at the end of the day, it's actually also telling the person the value of why I'm giving you a mechanical pencil instead of a traditional sharpened pencil, right?
Mhm.
So to that same analogy, that's kind of a lot of times what we face as founders, right? We are always caught up sometimes in the fact that it's a pencil, you should know how to use it, right? A pencil works exactly like that. Why don't you know, right? And then they go like, no, but I don't know. Like I've never grown up with that, right? You know. And so to that same analogy of mechanical pencils, you go like, yeah, don't you have it in school, right?
Mhm.
And some people don't. So I think that's where we bring the value to explain to them why is this technology, why is this way of doing things better or could be useful for yourself, right? And
Mhm.
truthfully, sometimes someone could not be compatible with a mechanical pencil in that
Mhm.
analogy, right? Then we have to understand that, okay, then what's the point are we doing? Are we trying to get him to write? Can we give him something else, right? A crayon.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. So I think that's kind of the gist of what we do as startup founders, and we have to sort of chart that path. But similarly, we also need to listen while we share, while we try to convince and influence. We also have to practice active listening as well. Yeah.
100%, man. Listening is a really important skill that, a lot of people actually don't learn. Like a lot of people don't learn how to listen properly. they think that what they're saying is gospel, for example, and
Yeah, yeah,
everyone should think the same way. But it is a skill that definitely needs to be learned, and I struggle a lot with it with a lot of English learners as well. Like
yeah.
people who are learning
Definitely.
English, they need to learn how to listen again. I think the same thing with founders, right? Putting the customer first and understanding their problems is key. How did you, I guess, learn some of these skills? Obviously, you started when you were very young, like
Mm,
doing small businesses here and there. But when you got to that stage where you're running a startup, I mean, what was that process like of all this skill acquisition?
yeah. Well, it's funny you brought up, right? Learning or like actively listening, it's such a crucial thing, right? And I think one thing I learned from a very young age was that whenever my dad or like anyone who I was remotely curious, right? I would always listen to what they say. And on top of that, I would ask like validating questions as well, right? Very
Mm,
naturally. And because I genuinely want to know what the hell are they talking about, right? So I think that's a very important trait to have. And I can give a simple analogy that just recently happened with me and my co-founder as well, right? He comes from a technical background as well. I used to be an engineer, as I mentioned, right? So for example, when we go into a client meet or a requirement, sometimes the client will say certain things and say, hey, can you solve this problem? And the very common thing a person who only wants to solve problems that they want to is to actually straight away go to the point whereby, oh, you have that problem, I can solve it this way, right? Then you spend 20 minutes explaining how to solve it. But the true thing is what we should have done is that we should always validate only once or twice and say, oh, I have something like that. Do you think it will work for you? Versus if it doesn't work a couple of times, we have to stop it and then start listening. Okay, so what am I not catching? What am I not listening from his viewpoint, right?
mhm,
Why is he saying this way? Why is he trying to solve this problem this way? Then you realize there could be somebody else that is actually pressuring him, or there
mhm,
could be somebody else that is dictating their goals. That's why they can't share, right?
mhm.
And these are very very practical things like and it boils down to about listening, right? Knowing when to listen, even though sometimes we're so fired up of what we believe in and what we've built that we know like insatiably that we can solve his problem, right? But we still have to listen. And I think the final thing I will share about this is that listening also creates a connection, right? And that connection actually will help you sell or help you close the deal or help you build trust as well. So sometimes we forget that. So if we don't listen enough, we end up not building trust or building a connection. Then sometimes those deals just don't happen. Yeah. And then we can't know why. Yeah.
Well, you bring up a really good point about communication. Communication is a two-way street. It's
Yeah.
talking, but also listening. And if you're only talking at somebody or sharing your ideas and not listening to the feedback, then you can't succeed as a founder, right? And
Yeah.
sales is communication. And I'm a firm believer that we should have a sales class in schools, for
Yeah.
example. Like we should be learning it in high school so other
Yeah.
people can start lemonade stands or other side businesses in high school to generate income and have a head start against some people that come out of university that don't know how to sell, right?
Yep.
They could have a
Yep.
head start and maybe even start their own thing. So I highly, highly agree with what you just said there. Awesome, man. So I want to transition now into your current startup. Okay, so tell us a little bit about Zavior and the problem you're solving.
Cool, cool. I think I mentioned a little bit about how like the industry of cybersecurity is a vertical, so that you
Mhm.
gotta be really, you can be very technical and very deep into that process, but it also affects every industry, right? So it's also a horizontal. So what we try to do is, I think when we started Xavier, we had two options, right? Go and solve that compliance hit or that IT hits problem only, or solve the business problem as well, right? So I think we picked the route of solving the business problem. And one of the business problems is actually understanding jargons, right?
Mm,
Ironic, right? So understanding jargons like consent of data, like what does that mean? Right? It sounds so big, like it's like, oh, but actually what consent means is that um does the other party know that you have that data? And does the other party know that he can also remove your access to that data?
Oh.
So that's kind of exactly what consent is all about. So it's like, hey, I'm taking your data, right? So I told you I'm taking your data. And then you go like, hey, please don't take my data anymore. Yeah, I gave you that access back then, but now I am not comfortable anymore, or I'm not going to use your solution anymore, or I'm not comfortable with things, or life is just different. So consent sounds like a big word because we try to label a lot of things, right? But actually at the crux of understanding all these things is just the act of telling each other what you're gonna do next, right?
Right.
And this is one of the small things that businesses don't understand, or find it difficult to wrap their head around, because someone in corporate threw a nice name at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we do is we help businesses understand the processes that are needed, right, towards getting their business compliance, right? And one of that is actually related to actually a lot of times related to sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what you do with your security ultimately is also to build trust for your clients, right? So what we do is we have a platform that allows people to manage all these requirements, right? And then they can do it step by step. So there's a way to do it in an actionable way, and then ultimately also get recognition for the work. Because a lot of times people in security and people who are technical, they could build 100 features and not be able to even sell one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we believe that a business that does the right processes, which is like encrypting their logins, ensuring that their databases are secure, they should be recognized as well, right? And that's why we believe that the journey of a business, understanding it to the point of executing it, and also to the point of celebrating it through certifications, which is something like ISO 27001, right? That's not the most secure certification, but it's kind of the most popular certification. So, right. So, for example, English is not always the best way to communicate because there's a lot of nuances, but it's the most popular. So then you kind of have to speak that same language in the security phase and in the tech phase of building trust as well. So we help people throughout that process decipher the jargons into something that's simple, and then helping them delegate to different people as well.
So with regards to like your ideal types of customers, are these enterprise, are these smaller companies, mid-sized companies? Like, what is your ideal type customer?
Well, I think right now at our stage, we're trying to help more startups and more SMEs, right? Small, medium, maybe semi-large as well, right? For the fact that I think there's two reasons as well. One is that the decision-making process is a lot faster, right? People tend to have a problem and then you can solve it, so you're closer to the ground. So that's kind of our main targets right now, because what we want to do is we want to help every single startup get their first certification. Right? We're on a mission that everyone get their first certification, get their first badge of honor, right? It might not be ISO 27001, right? But there could be other things that you can look towards, right? And something that the Singapore government has done pretty well is that they've given like a base layer, like a light version of ISO, right? Which is actually more encompassing in terms of operations rather than just governance, right? Because for a team of 2 or 3, what governance are you talking about, right?
Right.
I create the policy, I sign off the policy, or I create the policy, my co-founder or director signs it off, right? So sometimes ISO is a bit daunting because of all those things, but there are fundamental things that the fundamental policies, fundamental certifications that help, right? Which is what I mentioned, like what the Singapore government has done with this cyber essentials, which allows people to cover the basic things that will actually make their digital business secure minimally, right? So that's kind of the thing that we're trying to help people do as well. Yeah.
I see. So why do you think, I guess, so many startup companies or small, medium-sized businesses don't think about security at this time or at the moment? Yeah.
Well, I think people don't think about it. Maybe I'll debunk that myth, right? It's quite surprising, but actually many people do think about it.
Mm.
I think maybe they delay the action. right? The action of it is delayed because sometimes people feel that the product they built is yet to be adopted, so it's still very limited of users. So they say, why don't I push back this decision-making process, right? So I think we have to give credit to many startup founders as well, or many businesses, right? They do think and care about security. It's just that maybe they don't know when to start. They don't know when to begin because sometimes the thought process is like, I gotta be ready before I go into it. Then like my clients have to ask me. So there's always this song and dance between that. So I think people are thinking about it. And if you look at it from a consumer level, right? Why is Apple so successful to today? Because their technology is not that much greater than what Android has done or what other suppliers have done. But what Apple is actually selling to a lot of people is actually privacy, right? So privacy is actually resonating with people, even though it sounds like people don't care about it, right? It sounds like they don't care about, but it actually affects them, which then comes to the point why would Apple have a giant billboard and put privacy?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
they do so much of that because they know that people care about it. So I think the truth is people do care about it. It's just like when. And
That's
I
right.
think the startups just have that question. And that's why, after starting Zavior, we found that is pretty much true as well, right? People who come to us have this desire to create great products, create secure products. They don't want to lose their trust as well. But the question is, they always ask me, Glenn and my co-founder Derek, it's like, oh, so where do we start, right? How do we start? Who do we ask? What other things can we buy? What other things can we do to secure? So that's very heartening as well. Yeah, to know.
When is the best time for somebody to, obviously use your services? Is it after they already have everything built in, processes in place, or is it actually better to start from the beginning when everything's kind of getting started from scratch?
Well, that's a great point. I think there's two considerations, right? I think there's a term that everyone in our industry says it's called security by design, right? So what that means is that to a layman and to everybody else who has probably a home, right? Or you rent or a home that you live in, right? So the first question is this: when do you consider to get a door, right?
When you go.
Generally, yeah, you generally always think of when to get a door pretty often, right? So the question is, when you think that you want to have a door, then that's a given. But then how do you want to fit that door with, right? Like nowadays we're in an age where we can get digital locks as well, right? And then if you stay somewhere in Singapore or like apartments and condominiums, there's sometimes two doors, like a sort of a gate and then a door as
Yeah.
well. So these are some of the considerations that we usually like assume that whenever we buy a house, we have to consider the door. Because no one's gonna say like, oh, I'm not gonna buy a door, or like I'm gonna buy a door, I'm not gonna lock it. Right. That's not gonna happen, even though it's pretty safe in Singapore, right? In fact, people spend thousands of dollars just to get a lock in Singapore, which sometimes actually has no use because no one will come break in, right?
Mhm.
But I think the same concept is when is it ready is that you should always start thinking how to secure that main door, the side doors, like the room doors, the windows of your home, right? So you might not buy the best tech to solve it today. So what you do is, when you buy a house, you don't have enough cash to do any renovations. Just buy a standard key, right?
Yep.
Make sure that door has a lock. That's done. But if you start to have maybe more family or more friends, who are sharing with, or you sublet some of your units, then you want to have something that that's a bit more fancier. Then you have like doors, windows, and all. So that same concept of when to start, you have to start with a mindset first, and then like to what level of security, to what level of detail you want to secure, or to what level of comfort you want as well, right, to your business. So I think that question is, in a sense, two-part, right? The first part is you should always think of it because you would always have to consider it. then the next question is what level of security or what level of thing you can do at different stages of your life, you see? Yeah.
Is it similar though to, like you're saying, like it's obviously better to start from the beginning and have everything in place so that it's set from the beginning. Is it the same as when you have a house and you want to up the security of the house by buying an extra padlock or a digital lock, right? Can you still do that at a later stage
Yeah.
effectively?
Yeah, you can, right? But the only thing happens is that say this is a classic example of a CCTV, right? Okay.
Mm,
If you didn't start thinking of where would you put a CCTV in your home or in your office, right? And then you want to put it. So what's the biggest challenge that will happen is that you will have to find an outlet, right?
yes.
You will find an outlet. And then how much does it cost to now source a new outlet to that CCTV, right?
Makes sense. That
So
makes sense.
it's not impossible, right? But it just takes a little bit of extra work.
I see.
And then I roll it back to maybe something more technical, right? Is like so for some of us we use Docker, we use Kubernetes to release our code, right? In more technical conversation, right? What we also do is that we then have to create certain microservices that hinges on that, right? But if you don't think about it now, later on you start buying like or start adding more security, you can, right? But the effort to do that is quite difficult, right?
Mm,
So what we would do is in this day of cloud is pretty cool, right? You can always set up all your security measures, but then keep them at low operations, right? Like don't need to ramp them up straight away because now the cloud allows us to do that. So these are some of the like strategies that I would like advise to teams, you know, to think of like, just think of how to find placeholders, fit placeholders first, and then down the line you can increase the intensity.
right.
And people think that that takes up a lot of time. Actually, it doesn't, right? It's just like I said, designing the house that I got no cash today, but once I have it, this is where I want to put it, right? And I think it's as simple as that, actually. Yeah.
I see. You know, one of the things that people worry about with AI and this whole way the world is going is these agents, right?
Yeah.
These agents that are coming out of nowhere that can do everything without the human being involved. How do you see this situation? Do you see it as a threat? And I guess what is Zavior doing to prepare your clients and your customers and your business against maybe these agentic attacks? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think fundamentally on a global scale and a natural scale, I think agents are here to stay, right? They're here to stay because many of us don't want to do the same thing repeatedly, right? But the caveat is many of us, right? So I think if we're in an ideal world where we've got all the oil money or all the wealth from our grandparents, we can continue to do the basic things and then make the same amount of money or even more money. I think then agents become, you know, not viable, right? But the truth is, we want to do more, right? We want to do more in terms of what we want to do for society and so on and so forth. So the natural instinct is that agents are here to stay because they will do the things that are boring, that are mundane, right? There are things that you kind of really directly know what to do and you just want to repeat it. So I think that's why agents are here to stay. And similarly, we had this conversation in terms of like the world, right? About when automation came out, right? But now what agents do is they accelerate that process. Okay. So in that same sentence, after an agent does something, it's all about tracking, right? It's all about accountability, right? So similarly, when you would hire someone, right? You would implement like a buddy system. So a lot of American companies have buddy systems when you join a new corporate. So oh, this is your buddy, like who's your equal, he helps you out. Then you have a reporting manager, right? Then on top of that, you have a head of department, right? Then you also have the CEO. So similarly with agents, I expect that level of surveillance, right? Probably not so structured in that way, but structured in a manner whereby there will be some level of surveillance that someone guards another agent or another agent guards another agent. And to that context is that you still have to build that same structure, even though it's a bot, even though it's an artificial intelligence, because they are also prone to all the human problems, right? So actually, they are not much different from humans. So I think people forget that there are levels of securities you can control, you can create, you can monitor. So like logging as well, keeping track of the queries are some things that, actually we do that a lot, even to humans.
Mm.
Right? We do that to humans a lot. Like we actually monitor call centers, we record call center engagements to improve, right? So it's not any different from agents who are customer service agents right now, right? So I think we just need to find a different way to do the same thing. And the same thing is just saying that I need to put some governance into all these things, right? And I think that's where we're going to have to go eventually. I think people are already doing that. That's why there are terms like guardrails, and those are like safety measures in AI. I think those are here to stay. And maybe I share with you a more human analogy, right? Um, in Singapore, we have this thing, we have a department or a team who takes care fully of fire safety, right? So it's a dedicated person or it's a dedicated consultancy that talks about fire safety,
Mhm.
right? And here's the thing, like we always think from other countries, like who are maybe not first world countries or maybe third world countries have yet to find that luxury of having that like dedicated person to ensure your walkways are clear, ensure
Mhm.
your doors are secure. I think when AI matures, we will have someone consistently being there to be like that fire safety officer, right? To ensure that all these guardrails are there. And then that's part of the ecosystem that we're actually currently already building. Yeah. So I think it takes time, but at the end of the day, I feel it's exciting. I feel that like I said, I don't want to do some things that I know already how to do. So I really appreciate agents to do those work for me as well.
What
Yep.
you were describing, was that mostly for internal agents, like governance wise, right? If I'm running a company and I have several agents doing several different tasks, one of the security things I'm worried about, obviously, is one of them getting corrupted and ruining other parts of the business, right?
Mm.
That's one thing. The other thing is agents from outside interacting with our company, right? Which
No,
do you think, I mean, what you were describing before, is that more so for internal, external, or both? Yeah,
I think it's both. Yeah, it's
both.
both.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for me, a lot of talk is about agents that will just like attack, like, you have like, I don't know, agent hackers or something like that, right? Do you think that that's po a possibility? And
Well,
yeah, how
the
can we protect ourselves?
so we need to answer that the question of whether are there already agents that already have ill intentions? I think the answer is yes. There's already agents that do ill intention, right? And it's the same translation to humans as well, right? Whenever you create something new, is there another guy out there that also has an like ill intention to cause harm, right? So there are people like that, and there will always be agents in a way. If you watch Star Wars, wherever there's light, there's always darkness, right?
Yin and
So
yang, man, yin and
yeah,
yang.
yeah.
That's
So
it.
so I think that's a given, right? So now the question is that when we talk about agents, right, at the end of the day, it's no different from how we would govern our own staff, our own people as well, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to create an environment that allows people to excel, and agents are the same, right? The only difference about agent is that they don't feel that much and they have a pattern when they make things when they go off, right? So that's actually quite in a way comforting for myself as well, right? Because I can sort of figure out when it goes wrong, right? So that's one good advantage about having agents making mistakes, because we can actually find a pattern,
Mm.
right? I learned this actually a long time ago in my manufacturing experience. I used to work in a manufacturing environment as well. Whenever something has a problem, it's actually quite repetitive, so you can actually detect it. But humans, on the other hand, is unpredictable, right? So I think I would compare humans and AI agents. I think AI agents are a little bit easier to manage, right? In
Oh,
the same
interesting.
context, right? And I think similarly, I'll share some maybe like examples of like life, especially hiring as well, right? We actually have problems when we hire people today as well, because you don't know where people are in their life and in their process. And sometimes we have to also remember that they are human too. They go through stuff, and those things are really hard to measure, because like they might be going through maybe a divorce, or they're going through something at home, and it affects their work, right? And coming back to agents, is that like it's pretty much clear that agents are here designated to do a job. So in that same manner, right? I think it's harder to sometimes understand this new workforce that we're in as well than agents, right?
Mm.
So I see that as a positive, actually. So it's not that bad. And I think when agents become totally unpredictable, I think that's where we should get like worried. But they generally are still like, they have good boundaries, and I mean, it's not the era of Terminator where you have
Right,
to,
right.
where they come from the future to kill the creator. I don't think we're gonna get there. I think there's a lot science fiction.
Exactly. There's a lot of science fiction out there, and many people are like st already thinking about the doomsday scenarios for things. And I think it's all just go with the flow, see what happens, right? Obviously, we should prepare for certain things,
Right.
but no one knows when AGI is going to be here. No one knows what's going to happen next. So I think you're right, though. Humans are way more unpredictable than
Yeah.
machines. And that's part of
Definitely.
the reason why I'm, in Asia, because it's a lot safer here than it is in US, where there's a lot of
I would
unpredictable things
imagine.
happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cool, man. So, my last question for you on this topic is that, what are some other like cybersecurity companies or security companies that, you're keeping your eye on in terms of maybe competition or some of the innovative things that they're doing? Because you don't hear them in the news. You don't hear about other
No.
like AI security companies or cybersecurity companies that are innovating. It's always, oh, this product here, this product there, do this, do that, but nothing really on this sphere with that are creating the guardrails and the governance and things to keep AI in check.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes we are driven a lot by in a way, the American term can sound like pop culture, right?
Mhm.
Or the more mainstream information. And I think a classic example of the CrowdStrike breach. I mean, it's not really a breach, but it's technically a mishap from the security, from a software perspective, actually, right? But it so happened to be part of a software that affects infrastructure, right? So um, then when that affects the airlines and affects everyday people, then people realize that, oh, like there's something there. But the truth of the matter is, like there's a lot of work that has already gone like ahead of us. Even even the fact of like ChatGPT, right, and the introduction of LLMs, right? Google actually created the transformers way ahead than the popularization of LLMs, right? So I think what's to come in the future is actually, in a good sense, there's already a lot of things that are happening to secure it, to secure AI, to secure businesses. So that's something that I'm not too concerned of, right? As long as because in the B2B world, we do a lot of things that sometimes the consumer doesn't know, right? And then when shit happens, then that's when everyone knows, and then it gets brought to light. But in that aspect, things are already happening. But maybe what I would consider as a next step that we are watching as well, and everybody is watching, is actually in the space of quantum computing, right? Quantum computing is actually nearer than we think. I think Microsoft recently did something really cool with their quantum chip, right? Although it's not fully functional, it needs a lot of help. But I think quantum computing will actually even accelerate all these efforts. So I think what we're looking out for is actually what happens when that comes, right? what happens when that technology comes into our hands, just the way like it comes into ChatGPT. Because like I said, transformers are like maybe like couple years ahead, couple years back before ChatGPT, and quantum is now, and then probably the next 5 or 7 years or 10 years, right? We could see quantum happening. So quantum just means that like the magnitude of what we know today just accelerates, right? The magnitude of lock picking, becomes more smarter, and then like they can actually pick the lock faster and stuff like that. So I think as a business, this is what I feel could be the next move. Not so much of like the AI agents, the LLM, because I think they're here to stay, right? So I think we are looking at some of the technology, and we have actually met a few businesses and startups that are already trying to solve that problem, right? So that's pretty exciting in terms of technology. And I guess maybe in terms of what's closer to heart or for us, I think we're looking at some tech solutions that eventually will help businesses do it themselves as well, right? I think that could be a competitor for us that people could even do their own security programs. They could mature to run their own like programs, to run their own security teams with limited manpower, right? I think that's something that we know that is going to happen. But to be fair, looking at history of solutions, right? F&B has been around for so long, right? Like someone serving and serving and selling you food and cooking you food has existed for so many years, right? You can cook your own dish at home, and nowadays we got a lot of home cooks that are just as good as chefs in the restaurant. But why do we still dine, right? I think that's the question. So the reason is because we still want to be serviced. We still want people to service what we do. So I think at the end of the day, there could be new things that comes up, but I think service, value creation, it's still a pretty fundamental human desire that up to today and to the end of time would always have value, right? So I think there's not too much concern in terms of like what's next, but I think as long as we build value, we will always be able to stay ahead. Yeah,
That's the problem, man. A lot of people don't know how to create value. They're consumers. 99% of people in this
right.
world are consumers, right? It's the 1% that are the creators, right? So how do
Yeah.
you, I guess, make more people creators? That's the challenge. You
Yeah,
know, that
agreed.
is that is definitely a challenge. All right, well, it's been a great discussion today, Glenn. We do have a closing tradition on this podcast where the last guest left a question for you, and you'll leave a question for the next guest. Are you ready for your question?
Sure. Let's
All
go.
right, awesome. So, where do you think the world will be in 2 years? Are we trending towards a better future for everyone or a disaster? And if a disaster, do you have any suggestions on how we can readjust?
It's a funny question, because there have been elections in the past couple of years, and I wish that question would be like in the next 7 years, and then it'll be quite clear that things could change, right? But I think to the question of what's going to happen in 2 years, I think generally I think we are at a little bit of a reset phase, macro economically, right? Geopolitics and all these things, and I think there's a bit of a reset for everybody. And I think the way we consume products, the way we buy things are definitely going to change. And I think for example, like what I would expect is things like the relationship China has with the world will probably change as well, right? Because now there's a hole to um there's a hole to actually sell to other people and not through America, right? So it's these powerhouses trying to figure out how to put themselves in their position together. And then actually surprisingly, the rest of us in the world, we're gonna figure out how to maneuver that. We'll end up at something quite similar, just that maybe things change. But I think we're in that phase right now, right? I think in all countries. So I think what we should do, right, if it does get bad, right? So far it's looking okay. right? It's not too bad, honestly. Just that the word we use in Singapore is same but different, right?
Yes.
They're gonna be pretty much the same, just that maybe a different leader, a different thought leader in that process. But I think if it does go bad, I think one thing we can always, which I always we spoke a lot about this in this podcast, is actually value creation, right? I think as long as we know what value we're creating, right? Even though we're selling, let's say, a consumer product, right? We should be always be sensitive to what they're doing. Businesses still operate at the end of the day. So it's actually not that bad, right? People still run like delivery services because they need to, people still cook, people still do all the necessary things. So I think as long as we hunker down, focus on value creation at a unit level, and then slowly go up there, I think we're always gonna have that I would say stability, and whatever happens on the top, let it happen. Like the world will sort itself out, right? In finance, people we always say that the S&P always has over the space of 10 years, um there will always be growth, right? So it's just sometimes there's dips, but over the long term, the world will sort itself out. Things will always go. So I think it's not as grim as it is, but yeah, we're in a season of reset. Yeah.
I really like that. I heard something where it's people, humanity goes through cycles. And I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, you're right. We're going around a full circle moment. We had
Oh,
a lot of growth and then that's it, right?
the funniest analogy I I came to my mind when you said that was these chunky sneakers,
Oh, yes.
pants, right? Those were something that were a fad when sneakers first came out, right? Because that's the only way they could make sneakers, right? Like chunky, because they wanted cushion, and then today, like, that's actually a trend, a fashion trend, right?
Is it?
Yeah, and it's insane because and you're so shocked because now you realize that the world operates like that, right? We work in cycles, and actually repeat cycles. We take historical cycles and make them fashionable again.
Mm.
I think same in the digital space and in the business world. I think it's the same. We're gonna
Yeah.
expect the trend, but I think the key is knowing which trend comes first and what. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like you said, fashionable. I just hope that fascism doesn't become fashionable anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Absolutely. All right, cool, man. So now it's your turn to leave a question for the next guest.
Great, great. So my question for the next guest here is that what I guess the question is like, what drives you to do what you do today? And would you still do it if you lost like key factors in your life, or key people or things in your life, right? Is this something that you would still do today?
Interesting. Oh, I like that. That is a tough one, right? Because a lot of factors in our lives affect what we're currently doing.
Yeah.
And if you have a strong enough drive, maybe that doesn't matter, right? So, great
And if
question.
it's not strong, I think we can always relocate, right? Because I
Right.
think, yeah, that's life, right?
Exactly. That is life, man. Well, Glenn, really great discussion today. I'm glad I learned a lot about you and your business and the problem you're solving and really great insights. How can people connect with you best? Would it be LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, people can reach out to us on LinkedIn, and other than that, like, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and we can always drop our contacts, like, on the
Yeah.
on the description as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to link in Zavior because a lot of people who watch are startup founders, and if they could actually up their security from the start, that would be a huge thing for them. So really great stuff, man. Thank you so much for
Awesome,
today.
man. Thanks.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to share your PM stories, challenges, struggles, or insights with us on a future episode, please get in touch with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to have you on and keep this conversation going. Until next time, happy building, everyone.